What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Processing Blue, where we process blue for you. I'm Alex Zietlow. He's Mike Kaye, and we cover the Carolina Panthers for the Charlotte Observer. And Mike, I was thinking that I could just put you on the spot right up top. In honor of this being the NFL Draft Week, who are your three favorite prospects you've scouted all time? I know that's a crazy big question to start, but you've been in the league for a long time. You've covered the league for a long time. Three favorite prospects. Go.
Well, two of them are before I was even a beat writer. Two of them were back when I was a draft writer. I would say DeBrickashaw Ferguson, because that was the first draft that I really honed in on and wrote about. He obviously went to the Jets, was a career left tackle, blindside blocker. Bobby Wagner, there was something special about him, and at the time Utah State was not really known as like an NFL factory. Turns out he's my biggest success story of a like I was literally all about Bobby Wagner, all about him. Ended up going in the second round to Seattle. He's still playing somehow. He's kind of like the second iteration of Thomas Davis, where he plays for 100 years. Picks up all these tackles. Incredible player. And then third would be Jason Verrett, who was coming out of TCU, an undersized corner. And if you notice kind of a correlation, I fall for undersized corners who are scrappy. Chandler Rivers, for instance, is a guy that reminds me actually a lot of Verrett. Like, Verrett had really bad injury issues throughout his career, but had he stayed healthy, I mean, he might have been the best sub 6 foot corner of his era. Like, there was no reason why he couldn't be Brandon Flowers, if not better. Didn't kind of work out, got injured a lot with the Chargers, then went to the 49ers, kind of left the league without anybody noticing. But I maintain that if he would have stayed healthy, because like every time he was healthy, he balled. Like, he straight up balled out. But yeah, those would probably be the three off the top of my head.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, I've had some major misses.
Hey, bro, we ain't gotta dwell on those.
I would throw out another guy who actually didn't end up being very good, but was one of my favorite. Jeremiah Itachu, also went to the Chargers. Kind of bounced around the league, was not as good as I thought he'd be.
Well, we're not dwelling. Hey, Mike, we're not dwelling on the misses this podcast because we haven't missed this podcast. Because the NFL draft, exactly. The NFL draft is still a couple days away. We have a pretty packed show for you today. As you might imagine, we're going to talk all things NFL draft, considering the draft begins on Thursday at 8 p.m. and runs through Saturday. We'll also go over Mike's final mock draft, and we'll hash that out, which is dropping, actually just dropped on Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday. It just dropped on Wednesday morning for y'all to go check out. And we'll also discuss what the Panthers will do with the number 19 pick, which is what we're all here to talk about today. In between, we'll also have what I considered a really good interview with tight end prospect Eli Stowers. He has a really cool story and very well could land in Carolina if the dominoes fall into place. But before all of that, Mike, you wrote a story earlier this week that I kind of want to talk about. It gave us an inside look as to how the Panthers, quote unquote, set the table for the draft. In other words, you talked to General Manager Dan Morgan, Executive Vice President of Football Operations Brant Tillis, and discussed with them why they did what they did in free agency, what they're looking for in prospects for later this week. And I was hoping we could just spend some time on that. And how about we just open the conversation with this? Can you first start by explaining why you wanted to do this story in the first place?
Yeah, I've said on the podcast before, the offseason is really where I feel like we differentiate our coverage here. And it's something that I obviously have a lot of interest in, the salary cap, roster management, all that type of stuff. So I like knowing the why of everything, because I think it sets the table for what's to come. And I think before you can attack the draft, you have to understand the process of what you're trying to accomplish in free agency, and that leans into it. in the NBA, the process is different. In MLB, the process is different. But like in the NFL, when you're talking to these people that are making these multi-million dollar decisions, particularly one with Jalen Phillips, you want to know why they did what they did. And I think Dan Morgan and Brad Tillis both showed a measurable amount of self-awareness early on in that story, in acknowledging that they had to look at their hits and misses of the past to kind of improve. I think that speaks to the confidence and the rhythm that they have as a duo. I also think it was really noteworthy that they re-signed a dozen players on mostly one-year deals to have some known depth. I wanted to kind of get into that a little bit with them and understand their process there. But also, the headliners, Devin Lloyd and Jalen Phillips, are big contracts that they're hoping will work out. Why did they do what they did? And you can give all these canned answers in press conferences, but when you're sitting with a reporter one-on-one, typically you open up. And I think you'll see that in this story about their logic with Lloyd and Phillips. But I also kind of wanted to shine a light on somebody who behind the scenes is doing a lot of work in Justin Davidoff. I forgot his official title, but he's a coordinator within Grant Tillis's office. He works with negotiations. He handles a ton of stuff, and I wanted to give him the floor of understanding what his job was and why this ultimately sets them up in the draft to go BPA if they wanted to, whatever that means to whomever, because it has so many different definitions and there's so many different boards to consider BPA. One person's best available player will not be another's. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to get the understanding in the offseason. We've done stories like this whenever I've gone to the owners' meetings, and typically they've opened up some information pockets that I think are important for the discussion moving forward. But also, when you go back and look at them in 2027, you'll understand kind of some of their processes and as well as their quirks.
Yeah, no, it's great for the Panthers record, so to speak, like their general, how you kind of see how they evolve over seasons, and you can always go back. I've definitely gone back and read some of your stories from a season or 2 seasons ago just to see how we got here. That is football administration coordinator Justin Davidoff, by the way. Okay, one quick follow-up about this story that you did, which I thought was really this was probably the most interesting thing to me in the story, was a quote that Dan Morgan gave you. He said, quote, "We were comfortable with the idea of let's go get Jalen Phillips and then let's wait and see what comes out of that. That's a little different than what we were doing last year, which was, quote, what can we give Milton and Trey Merrig and still be solvent?" Oh, excuse me. That was from Brant Tillis, not Dan Morgan. Still, the quote is still pretty compelling. Why do you think they changed their frame of thinking in this way this year, Mike? And do you think it'll ultimately be effective?
Well, Brant told me explicitly that last year's free agent stuff with Milton Williams had nothing to do with this class, as far as, overextending and overpaying. He also was pretty adamant that they did not have an agreement with Milton Williams whatsoever. And he's been adamant about that pretty consistently since that happened. So is Dan. I think the process was different in that they know that they are a few players away, as opposed to being a team that is trying to ascend, right? They got to the playoffs. They won the division. The expectations are higher and the needs are a little bit more fine-tuned. And I think they felt that with Jalen Phillips, we've talked about it on the show before, he's kind of the perfect fit. There are about like 10 players like him in the league, where you can be an edge rusher who can be in space, who can be in coverage, who can create pressure, who can do pretty much anything you ask them to do, be a jack of all trades at that pass rusher position. And he's what I would call a force multiplier. Not only can he make an impact, but he can make an impact for others. And right. I think if he stays healthy for 15 to 17 games, I think Nick Gordon's going to have a massive sack here. Obviously, this can't be the Processing Blue podcast without mentioning Nick Scorton.
I'm glad we did.
But I think they thought that if they were going to get a game changer at edge, that it was worth the money. Again, I do still think they overpaid a little bit based on the injury history and the production, but they went for it. And that's something that a lot of fans want. That's what a lot of analysts preach. And they went for it. And I think once they were able to let the market reset, they knew they wanted a playmaking inside linebacker. And that's when they pounced on Lloyd. Unlike the year before, where the plan was Trayvon Merrick's the guy, Milton Williams the guy. Let's go see what we can do from the standpoint of getting both of them in-house. But Merrick was their top target, mainly because he plays a position that doesn't cost as much as defensive tackle. And he was a guy that was attainable. Milton Williams, it was always going to be a dogfight in negotiations. That's just what it was. He was coming off an incredible Super Bowl appearance, a career year, was doing all this stuff. Merrick was a little bit more under the radar and more of a traits guy and a specific scheme fit. So I think that's the difference. Like, Phillips was clearly what they wanted. And look, we've said this on the podcast before. This was a surprise to me. And I believe it was a surprise to you because everything I was hearing out of Philly, everything I was hearing around the league was Phillips was going back to Philly. And the Panthers just came in over the top, made a great offer, and there it was.
Yeah. And they found a way to get Devin Lloyd. And they found a way to add all these other pieces in free agency, which makes kind of... I wonder how this free agency will age, because I think it could be quite transformational. But we're not here to talk exclusively about free agency, though free agency, as you wrote, had a really large hand in what the Panthers will do later this week in the NFL draft. Let's talk about the draft. And let's specifically talk about your mock draft, which had Omar Cooper Jr., the wide receiver out of Indiana, going in the first round to the Panthers at that number 19 pick. Just set the table for us, Mike. Can you explain your thinking on that selection?
Well, mock drafts to me are not about matching exactly what a team's going to do. They're exercises in understanding the chaos and the unpredictability of a draft, especially in the first round, because there are so many different ways this can go. And the previous mock draft that I did, I went with Dylan Thieneman out of Oregon. And there's been a lot of rumors about the Cowboys having interest, Minnesota having interest in front of the Panthers. So I felt like the final mock draft, we should check out that scenario of if Dilly T was not on the board. And I think that's going to create a conversation, right? It's not just about, oh man, Kaye picked this guy, blah, 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 blah. It's what do they do if Dylan Thieneman's not on the board? And now I don't know that Dylan Thieneman is their number one target. I don't think anyone does. The McMillan stuff where it's like, he was the target all along. Yeah, Dan Morgan liked him the whole time, but I don't think everybody knew that he was going to be the guy, because that would be a pretty weird process to have, especially picking at 8. Especially when they were taking trade calls. So I think with this mock draft in general, I tried to acknowledge what I've seen, what I've heard, what I think I know. And I went with a guy who's pretty dynamic. Omar Cooper has had a visit with the Panthers. I know a lot of people are big on guys having visits. They definitely get drafted here. It's a little different when you're picking 19 as opposed to 8 or 1 or whatever in each round.
And a lot of wide receivers have had 30 visits here. But yeah.
Right. Yeah. So Cooper, I really think he's a natural fit for what they don't have. He's a guy who can work the slot. He's tough as nails. He can run through arm tackles. He runs angry. He's coming from a winning program. He knows what is expected of a winner. He would allow Jalen Coker to move outside to the Z position, which I think is his natural position. And while Coker and T-Mac are able to win above the rim, Cooper is really an underneath threat who can get yards after the catch. He had more than 7 yards per catch after contact. last season. I know the numbers are kind of run of the mill. I think he had 937 receiving yards last year, but 13 touchdowns. He's much bigger than his 6 foot, 199-pound frame. You would think that he was 6'2" and 220 if you're watching him. I love what he does after the catch. I think you can use him on screens. I think you can use him in motion. He's a pretty similar kind of value prospect to Casey Concepcion, in my opinion, who I also like, but they're different in that Casey is probably you'd view more as a deep threat. They're both good with the ball in their hands. Cooper has more dependable hands. Casey is more flashy, is what I would say. I don't think either would be a bad pick for what it's worth. I just went with Cooper, who I think screams Brad Isaac and Dave Canales guy. Because he's so much of a technician. He's so much of a finisher. He can beat zone coverage. He can beat man coverage. He does a lot of things technically well, and he's a winner. And I think that was kind of my thought process. I still would take it if Thieneman's on the board. He's the guy for me. Right? Like in my opinion, he would. I mean, we'll talk about that a little bit later on the show. But to me, if he's off the board, I think it opens up a lot of discussion where it's like, do you go wide receiver? Do you go to offensive tackle? Which Monroe Freeling, who I took in my first mock draft, I've seen him all over I've seen him as early as 3. I've seen him as late as like 25. If he's there with Thieneman, then it's a really interesting discussion because I don't know that you can necessarily pass that up with Rasheed Walker making only $4 million. And I would argue if you take an offensive tackle at 19, that's an open competition at left tackle, and you are fine with Walker losing it.
Yeah.
So
and I know we're going to talk a little bit later in this particular show about what we think the Panthers should do, what they will do, and what they shouldn't do, or whatever the case may be at the end of the show. But just one follow-up on this. And I'm saying me and you, but I'm also saying the local media, has spent a lot of time talking about how the Panthers could use that first-round pick in terms of getting an offensive playmaker for Bryce, adding a tight end, adding a wide receiver. Does it kind of feel like this could be some sort of smoke screen or some sort of like distraction point, and Thursday night rolls around and Dan Morgan is drafting, I don't know, like a pass rusher or so? I mean, a pass rusher would be quite unlikely considering they're like just spent a whole bunch of money for Jalen Phillips and something, but not just a pass rusher, like a cornerback, or like, I don't know, man. Like last year, we really thought the Panthers were going to go on the defensive side of the football. Alex Zietlow really thought that they were going to go and get Jalen Walker, and they kind of did the opposite of that. Are you at all feeling a bit nervous that we're zoning in on the tight end wide receiver spot at this point?
Listen, when you go, there's no rule against when the GM goes, there's no rule against drafting a wide receiver 3 years in a row. I think either Dan Morgan really wants you to think he's going to take a wide receiver, or he's hiding in plain sight and will take a wide receiver. So yeah, it gets your radar going and your conspiracy theories going. I don't know who would be at 19 pass rusher wise that you'd pounce on. I mean, Akeem Mesidor is the guy who's normally in that range in mock drafts. He's going to be, he's 25. So if he plays well enough and gets that 5th-year option, he's going to be 30 by the time he signs his second contract. Now, if you're a GM and you're thinking like 7 years down the road, I don't know that you're necessarily helping yourself out. I mean, if you go and win a Super Bowl during that span, because Mesidor is averaging, 14 sacks a season, whatever. But I think that would be a tough sell after you just spent $120 million on Jalen Phillips.
Right. Yeah.
You've invested in Nick Scorton, who is clearly ascending and who is, by the way, gonna be 3 years, or is more than 3 years younger than Mesidor
already. Yeah.
Right. And then you've got Princely Uman-Milan and Pat Jones, other guys you've invested in. I just think it'd be a tough sell. The tight end aspect of it, I know you're very high on Kenyon Sadiq. I'm high on him in a silo. I don't know that I'm high on him for the Panthers, just because I do feel like, one, that first round tight end is typically hard to get an ROI of success on.
Mm.
It normally those guys aren't immediate like the teams aren't beneficiaries of them immediately. They don't benefit from them to the point where it's like a game-changing difference. But he's so talented. But he reminds me of Janu Smith, and Janu Smith took a little bit to kind of get off the ground. Like even Kyle Pitts, how good he was his rookie year, I don't know that he was the be all end all there. And so I think that's the debate you have to have internally. Um, I think taking an offensive tackle, if you really, really like him over a tight end, makes a lot of sense. Safety's different in that I just think Thieneman is such a scheme fit and he's a premium prospect at a non-premium position. That's like the way that I've kind of explained it. And he and Trey Merrick together, pre-snap looks would bother the heck out of me as an opposing offensive coordinator.
Yeah. Okay. We will revisit this discussion after this, but before we do that, this is a good time to kick it over to our interview with Vanderbilt tight end Eli Stowers.
And we're joined by Vanderbilt tight end Eli Stowers, who is a few days away from living out a pretty big dream of his. Eli, how are you doing? How have the last 3 or 4 months been? What's going on right now?
Yeah, no, it's been good. Sorry, I apologize. I'm all sweaty. I'm like in the middle of a workout right now, but no, it's been going good, man. I've just been soaking it all in. You know, like you said, I mean, it's been a dream of mine, and for me to go through this whole process, I'm just I'm so grateful that God allowed me to be here, and it's a blessing. And so I'm putting my head down to work, and I'm kind of just soaking it all in. So.
For folks that don't know, you've kind of been everywhere. You've played multiple positions, you've been at 3 separate schools. But since you got to New Mexico State and then Vandy, really focusing on that tight end position, you've ascended up, the national conversation and now up draft boards. Why do you think you've had such a steady acceleration over the last 3 years at this tight end position after coming into college as a quarterback?
Yeah, well, I think that me playing quarterback helped with that. I think it helped the transition a lot just because, the cerebral aspect of football. I mean, that's all quarterback is. It's all mental. And so, me kind of understanding the game and that from that point of view, understanding what everybody on the offense does with it, how defenses work, how defensive structure works, all that kind of stuff. It helped the transition a lot just mentally. And then from that point, it was just, I'm a good athlete. And so some things came natural, but, everything to the tight end position, all the techniques, all the, in the blocking game, the route game, catching ball, everything. It's all, I have to just hone in on my technique, continue to get better with every single aspect of my game since I'm so new to the position. So.
And I wanted to ask more about your background as a quarterback. You honestly have a pretty interesting and inspiring story when it comes to how you were recruited out of high school as a quarterback, landed at New Mexico State, where you linked up with Diego Pavia. You were actually in a quarterback competition with him for a while before he became who he is at Vanderbilt. And you two obviously built something really special at Vanderbilt this past year. What was it like competing against Diego at New Mexico State for that starting quarterback job?
Yeah, I mean, everything that you see about him as like a competitor and how much he loves the game, he's always been that way. I mean, when he was in New Mexico State, he wherever he goes, he wins. And so, he started out at JUCO, won a national championship there. Went to New Mexico State, we won 10 games. Beat a Power 5 team. Went to Vandy, we ended up almost making the playoffs. And he just wins at places that historically haven't won. And I think that is just a testament to like how much of a competitor he is, how much he loves football, how good of a leader he is. I mean, like you said, when I got to New Mexico State, I was thinking that I was going to compete with him for the starting quarterback position, and I was going there to start. And so I learned pretty quick that he wasn't going to make that very easy. Like he's going to, in every single aspect of life, like not even on the football field, he's going to compete with whoever he has to compete against to try to win. And so, it was good. It taught me a lot about myself as well, just being around him. So.
Well, what did it teach you about yourself? And then how did it perhaps make the move to tight end a bit easier, knowing how good your quarterback was going to be?
Yeah, I think he kind of taught me like just the work ethic that I think I hadn't been completely instilled in me. Like I grew up, I was a coach's kid. I knew how to work. But when I met Diego, I was like, man, this guy's on like a whole nother level of like putting his head down and working and grinding. And, then any free time he had, he was up at the facility doing something to get better. And I think that he taught me that in a sense, like when I moved to tight end, I knew that that's what it was going to have to take for me to be successful at the position. And so, I just kind of took after him and started putting my head down and working. And thankfully, the work ended up paying off for me in the end. But and then I think like you said, just knowing that I had a quarterback that was going to go out and compete and put us in the best play. He's super smart. He understands the game. He knows how to put the ball in the right place. I just have to be in the right spot, and he'll get it to me. And so I think it definitely helped the transition, especially with us having chemistry and being in the quarterback room, hearing the same stuff from our coach and everything. So
Well, and not to belabor this point, but your chemistry together was extremely successful. Typically, with shorter quarterbacks, they have trouble throwing to the middle of the field. It just kind of seemed like you guys were in sync and just watching the film. Why do you think you guys were able to connect with having maybe a shorter quarterback, but also a guy who is learning on the fly at tight end?
yeah, I think that Diego, his height doesn't matter because of how good of a player he is. Like and I don't know if y'all saw like the little Gruden thing that he did. He's smart. He's super smart, and I don't think people really understand that. Like so sometimes he doesn't even have to see where he's throwing the ball, because I just have to be in the right spot, and that's me kind of being a former quarterback. Like if I'm running my route at the right depth in the right spot, being there at the right time, Diego can throw it to a spot, and I'm going to be there. And so I think that's what, it just kind of helped us have that chemistry because we have that same kind of mental background. And so, if I'm over the middle, he don't even got to see me a lot of the time. Sometimes I can't see him. I just know that, I'm going to go somewhere in the middle of the field. I need to be in the right spot. He's going to let the ball go where it should be. And, I should be there. So,
Another guy you seem to have a lot of chemistry with is former Panthers tight end Jordan Matthews, who was working as a coach with you at Vanderbilt this year. What was it like learning from him? I mean, Alex and I got to see him coaching up guys who were veterans in the locker room on a daily basis. I can only imagine what a resource he could be for you as a college tight end who's making a transition. He obviously transitioned from another position as well.
yeah, I mean, he was a blessing to our whole program. He just having somebody that kind of had a career that was like he went through a lot during his NFL career. He experienced a lot of success. He experienced some downs, and having somebody that kind of just learn how to deal with that adversity, start taking care of himself, taking care of his body, dealing with whatever team he was going to be on, whatever his role was going to be. You don't stay in the league for 10 years for no reason. And so I think that, when he was able to come to our program and teach us, what the work took, how much we should be pouring into our body, how much we should be listening to our coaches, how much we should be focusing on what we do in college because of how it can set us up for the next level. I mean, he taught us so much, and he helped the tight ends a lot, especially in the receivers, because he played receiver in college and in the league, and then he also transitioned to tight end, and so he had both of those kind of point of views, and so he was especially helpful in that sense.
Eli, we're talking a lot about multiple positions in this interview, and which is interesting and fitting because a lot of NFL teams are reportedly evaluating you as a wide receiver as well as a tight end. I'm just curious, what do you think about all that? Is that a big deal to you at all? Would you welcome playing a wide receiver as a pro? Can you just kind of tell me how you kind of absorb that?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I'm a football player, and I've done pretty much every position on offense that you could think of except O line. I mean, I've played out wide, played in the slide, played attached my hand in the dirt, off the ball, in the backfield, at quarterback. I've literally played every position on the offense. And so, if any team wants to use me wherever, I'm a football player. I'm gonna just, I understand the game and I'm able to learn. And so, I'm open to playing whatever. But I think that it shouldn't be like, um, taken away. Like I hear a lot of stuff about my blocking and stuff playing tight end, and I think that like the strides that I've taken in the past couple years in blocking, like if you go watch the film, you can tell that, one, that I certainly have the will, but two, that I'm getting a lot better as well. And that I put some good blocking tape on film this past year, especially. And so, like I said, I feel like I have the ability to play whatever, and I would love to play tight end. I'd love to play receiver. I'd love to play whatever a team wants me to do. I just want to help the team win. So.
I mean, there are a lot of examples, though, of guys who are primarily receiving threats. Zach Ertz, you brought up Jordan Matthews, that have careers that are primarily receiver first and, winning on Y options and slant routes and post routes. What is your favorite route to run, and why do you think that fits your game so much?
Well, you actually said it. It's the Y option route. And whether it's at off the ball and a little 5 yard option route, or even we ran a lot of the 10 yard option routes at Vandy. I think it helps me, because I still kind of see the game in the perspective of a quarterback, and I think that the option route is good for me because it's so cerebral. Like you're reading the guy's leverage, you're reading what a defense is doing. Are they in zone? Are they in man? What leverage are they in? Where's the hole if it is in zone? What zone are they in? So like you're reading all that on the fly, and that's why I like that. I like that route because I think that I've kind of understand it in that sense, and I have the athleticism and the ability to separate if they're in man coverage or anything like that. So.
We obviously cover the Panthers. What's been their level of interest throughout the offseason? You've been mocked, including by me in my first mock draft, to this team. What do you know about Carolina? What type of conversations have you had, if any? And has Jordan told you anything about Charlotte or that locker room?
Yeah, I mean, just like Carolina is a team that is, on the come up and they're on the rise, and everything that they're doing is they're continuing to get better. They have a young team on offense, and they're building a lot around the new stars and newcomers that are starting to get better. And I would love to play there. I've talked to the Panthers a couple times. Jordan has told me a lot about it. He loved his time there. With me and the tight end coach and Coach McPherson and Jordan, they've all talked about like how they used to banter and stuff, just so they love each other. And so I mean, I would love to play there, man. It'd be a blessing.
Eli, I wanted to ask about the combine. I know it was a while ago at this point, but your numbers were pretty remarkable. 4.51 40-yard dash, 45.5 vertical jump, which is the best among tight ends in combine history. I think it's second most all time in any position in the combine. And one guy that you kind of, for better or worse, always get compared to is Kenyon Sadiq, another really good tight end prospect in this draft. When you were at the combine, were you, checking in on Sadiq's numbers or Kenyon's numbers to see, oh, wow, okay, this is how fast he ran. Oh, this is how high he jumped. Like, what was that like? And just in general, through the pre-draft process, have you been keeping an eye on what Kenyon Sadiq has been doing, or are you kind of just running your own race?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I'm running my own race, but me and Kenny trained together out in Phoenix at Exos, and so I knew he was gonna do some crazy stuff. I knew he was gonna go out there and run a ridiculous 40. I guarantee you that, and I knew he was gonna jump well. So, but I think we knew that we were gonna compete, and we had been competing the whole time we were out there. And so I was happy to see him do well. I was obviously blessed to do well myself, and so in terms of like after the combine, what's been going on. I mean, I haven't had social media on anything for the last couple years, and so I mean, I tried to just not pay attention to anything, and what's gonna happen, pay attention to anyone else because you never know what's gonna happen on draft night. Everybody's got their opinions, and everybody's got what they think's gonna happen. You have no clue, and so I'll just try to stay where I'm at, be where my feet are, and just trust that God puts me in the right spot. So.
Eli, I guess our last one for you is what does we're recording this a week and a half before the draft. Obviously, this is a big time for you, your family, and everybody who supports you. What's the next week or so look like? What are you doing for the draft? And how is this all going to play out for you as far as taking care of family members, making sure everybody feels like they got a piece of this celebration?
Yeah. I mean, I got one more visit with the Broncos. I'm actually leaving to go there tonight, and then after that, I'm just gonna be training. I'm staying around this area where I'm from, and we're gonna do something here. Just be with my family members, be my close friends. Like, it's a dream come true just to be in this position in itself. And then, whatever happens on draft night will be a dream come true as well. It's a blessing, man. And so, if I can share that with people I love, it'd be amazing. And, I really look forward to that. So.
Well, Eli, thanks for joining us. We wish you luck in the rest of this process. Maybe we'll be seeing you soon.
Yes, sir. I appreciate y'all.
Yeah. Thanks, Eli. All right, Mike, that was great. He had a lot of interesting things to say about his journey, about his quarterback, Diego Pavia, Jordan Matthews. It was a great time.
It was so good. I shaved my beard off after that interview. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think the Diego stuff was pretty compelling, right? I mean, that's what an acknowledgement and what a backing of his quarterback. I also think it kind of transcends over to Bryce Young and talking about the work over the middle of the field. I like what he said about running Y options, which is an option route at the tight end position. I like what he had to say about Jordan Matthews. Jordan Matthews is a guy that we did a lot of work on while he was with the Panthers. Good dude. It's cool to see him helping the next generation of tight ends / wide receivers. So yeah, I enjoyed that.
Yeah, absolutely. Interestingly enough, you did previously take Stowers in a previous mock draft at Panthers pick number 51. And in this most recent mock draft, you opted to take someone else. You opted to take safety AJ Halsey out of LSU. Why do you like him so much? And I know that, and just explain how AJ and Dylan Thieneman kind of compare and contrast if you can.
Yeah, I really like this safety nickel class. I think when we're talking about safety, we also have to talk about the nickel position because of how the Panthers use the nickel position. They have a base nickel position and they have a big nickel position, and they like to move guys around and mismatch guys post snap. I think this is a deep class for that. I think Thieneman, I saw some feedback in the comments about us talking about it being deep, but why would you take Dylan? Thieneman is like a premium player. I think he is a top 15 player in this draft. And he's such a fit. He is such a fit. It's similar to the Jalen Phillips thing where it's he is a force multiplier. He will make Merrick better. He will make the corners better. He will make the inside linebackers better. You can use him in all different ways. I think that he is the guy that, if you said, do you have a safety that you can fit into here? They're done. They don't even have to worry about it. He's the guy. He's a massive upgrade, blah, 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 blah. That's him. But I do think the second round has some really good players. There's Miami's Keontae Scott. There's, depending on how much you like Jalen Kilgore, he might be a second, third round guy from South Carolina.
There's Jacob Rodriguez, the linebacker out of Texas Tech, who Luke Kuechly has proclaimed his favorite linebacker in the draft, which is the Panthers fan base has really taken to. So yeah, there's a lot of good guys right there.
Right, but just focusing on nickel and safety.
Sorry.
Trading Stukes is another guy. I think, like Rodriguez, they'll both be gone in the top 40. And so Halsey was an interesting guy because he's got kind of like an old school vibe to him. He's not the biggest guy. He's around 5'11". But he's got a lot of grit to him. He's strong. He loves making tackles in open space. And I remember the day before the Panthers played the Cardinals, I was in Scottsdale at a sports bar and watched LSU versus UF. And he was everywhere. He had an interception. His ball skills are tremendous. He's well-traveled. Started at New Mexico State, went to Houston, and then went to LSU. And he's a guy that I just kind of think has a feel for the ball in the air. I think he would match Merrick's kind of versatility. He can play in the box. He can play in those double high sets. He can play nickel. He can tackle guys who are bigger than him. He likes to lay down the wood, so to speak. He's a guy that matches his finesse as a ball hawk with his physicality as a run defender and play stopper. And I think he is an interesting player for this team if they were to go that route.
Yeah. According to NFL.com, a source told, I think it was Lance Zierlein.
Yeah, it is.
Quote, a Pro Bowler in the right scheme is AJ Halsey. So that's cool. Okay, quickly, let's go through your third round pick. You decided to select Tyler Oyedem, a defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. Why'd you go DL in the third round?
Before I do that, Halsey went to University of New Mexico. Sorry. He went not New Mexico State, excuse me.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, no problem.
Sorry, there's a lot of information for this draft flowing around this brain and in yours as well.
Yeah.
The bandwidth is not as wide as it was.
It is shrinking.
It is shrinking, yes. Anyway, Oyedem is a guy that I think makes sense as a A'Shawn Robinson replacement, largely because he's got length, he's got burst. I was talking to Dave Canales out in Phoenix, and that's kind of what he wanted. He wanted immediate burst, long arms. That's what he wants in that defensive end position. And I think Tyler O, as we'll probably start calling him if he comes here, is just a guy that bursts off the line. He's very good at shedding blocks. He can get upfield. I think he's a guy that's a really nice complement to Turk Wharton from a run defensive standpoint. At times, it felt like teams were just running at Turk Wharton when he was playing, 50 snaps a game. If you can cut down his workload and move in this kid, I just think it makes a ton of sense. Dan Morgan said last week that he thought the defensive tackle class was top heavy. And to me, that says you got to take a guy in the top 3 rounds. And I think the kid from Texas A&M fits kind of the profile of what they would want. He's probably a 3 technique and a 4-3 defense, but he can play 4-eye. He can play inside. He can move around. He's got that versatility that A'Shawn Robinson brought. And you're drafting him at a point where you don't have to kind of bench Bobby Brown or Turk Wharton to satisfy his draft pedigree. He can kind of work his way in as the 4th defensive tackle or defensive end, what have you. And I think he makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. It does sound logical. Mike, let's...
Well, and also you can read the rest of that Panthers only mock draft on charlotteobserver.com. You're probably asking yourself, what about the offensive line? Well, you'll see what I did there. You'll see about the inside linebacker solution and possibly a new tight end. So check that out.
Yeah, the Panthers have 7 picks in this year's draft, and knowing Dan Morgan, they might end up with 8. They might end up with 9. They might obviously end up with less, but he is someone who wheels and deals a lot on draft night. So, and this isn't just limited to the 2026 NFL draft as well. There could be consequences to the 2027 pick selection coming out of tonight. Out of Thursday night. So really consequential day. Mike, let's close the show by just really honing in on that number 19 pick. I was thinking we should talk about what the Panthers will do, our ultimate predictions for number 19, and what they should do at number 19. I'll go first. You can edit me, revise me, give me your thoughts on what you think, and then I want you to do the same thing. I think they will take Kaye Concepcion just based on his ability, his versatility, what he can bring to this offense. And then also just, the Carolina aspect of it, the Charlotte aspect of it, that does seem to be something. It does seem to hold some sort of water with the franchise. I read somewhere that Kaye Concepcion is kind of compared to Doug Baldwin as well. And if you guys, I'm sure you guys all know, Doug Baldwin worked with Dave Canales over in Seattle for several years, and Dave has just sung Doug's praises. He's that tough guy. He's someone who can get separation out of man coverage. I don't think you can really go wrong with taking an Omar Cooper or someone like that. But I don't think you can. I think a double off the wall is Casey Concepcion, and that's really building on this wide receiver room. And I know it's 3 wide receivers in the first round in 3 consecutive years, but there's no rule against that, and I think the Panthers ultimately do that. As far as who I think they should take, oh, excuse me, go.
Oh no, I was going to say there's just so you know, there is a lot of smoke there, a lot of smoke, which is part of the reason why I kind of think it's a red herring. But if it is, I mean,
what do you mean? What do you mean by smoke?
I've had a lot of conversations that have led to Casey Concepcion, like a lot of conversations, is what I would say, and he's a name that I constantly hear around the league. He's somebody that I've chatted along with some people about. There are people in the league that think that Concepcion makes a lot of sense for them. So I don't whether they take him or not is another thing, but I don't think you're barking up the wrong tree.
Okay. And then when it comes to who they should take, I'm going to be very basic here. Oregon tight end Kenyon Sadiq. If he's there, you got to take him. I think you can't pass up an athlete like that. He recorded the fastest 40 time among tight ends in NFL scouting combine history. He can out jump safeties, outrun corners. He can bring an explosive element to this tight end room that the Panthers simply don't have right now. As much as Dan Morgan and honestly, as much as Alex Zietlow likes this tight end room, I don't think you can pass up someone like Kenyon. I think you should stray away. We talked about this. I think we should stray away from the edge rusher and cornerback position. We talked ad nauseum about Akeem Mesidor this podcast, but I will echo your points. I was planning on talking about that, which I'm glad you covered. No need to draft for depth at the number 19 position. Go get your number 1 tight end. Go get your number 1 wide receiver. And they have the opportunity to do that if those 2 guys are on the board. Mike, anything you want to add or amend to that, or do you want to go ahead with your picks?
I'm not as high on Sadiq as you are, but I also get it. Like I don't think it's a bad pick.
But he literally might be the most athletic tight end in the history of like prospects, bro. Like
at one point Vernon Davis was, and the returns were kind of up and down. I just like, to me, tight end, and tight end's my favorite position. I'm not like discounting the position. I just think, one, the gap between him and the next tight end is not as wide as one would.
That's a good point. That is a good point.
And I also think he's a guy that would potentially disrupt the flow of the offense from the standpoint you'd want to do a lot of different things with him, and that could change roles for other people. I think the reason why Omar Cooper is who they will ultimately end up with. Don't know. Sorry, aggregators.
They're gonna grab onto what you say anyway.
Well, they're gonna grab onto the KC stuff that I said, I'm sure. I think Omar Cooper allows T-Mac and Coker and Tremble and Chuba and all those guys to thrive in their current roles, and he only just expands the ROI, the return on investment. To me, what they're lacking is a guy who can win across the middle and be a consistent possession receiver. And I think Cooper makes a lot of sense for them. But who they should take, if he is there, I would even, they could do the funniest thing. They could jump the Vikings using their 5th round pick, which I think would be genuinely funny if they moved up to 17 to take Thiemann. That would be one, as a fan of humor, that would be like the ultimate, like, funny moment in my opinion.
Pretty sick. Not many people are predicting the Panthers to move up in the first round of this draft, but that'd be pretty interesting.
I don't think they want to give away 2027 picks. So I'm less inclined to think they would, but Thiemann to me is the guy that they should take. I think he is an ultimate just plug and play. You can move on. You talked about doubles off the wall, as Daniel Jeremiah told us. Doubles off the wall, I think he's a triple. I really do. I think he is a guy who can change the face of this defense. Remember, as I said earlier, Merrick was their top target in free agency last year. How can you make Merrick better, but also the guy you signed a multi-year contract extension with, J.C. Horn, the guy you just signed for $41.9 million, Devin Lloyd, better? Similar to thinking, hey, how can you make Nick Scorton, Derek Brown, Turk Wharton, Bobby Brown better? Well, you put another guy on the outside of the edge who can do a ton of different things. Thiemann, to me, I think he could be this year's McMillan. I really do, from like the standpoint of being a game changer. I'm very, very high on him.
Wow. Pretty powerful stuff. All right, Mike, that's pretty comprehensive. I'm sure we're closing in on an hour or so at this point.
Hey, listen, it's the draft special.
Hey, it is a draft special. Hey, I'm cool with it, bro. I'm cool with it. I'm just saying it's comprehensive. Anything else before we get on out of here?
As Alex mentioned, I wrote about the front office and their outlook to the offseason. Check that out on charlotteobserver.com. Alex did a really great job compiling 3 options for each position that the Panthers might look at in the draft. Check that out on charlotteobserver.com. Columnist Scott Fowler also wrote about his plan. And then Thursday, we offer up our annual predictions on the Panthers draft. That'll be from Scott, Alex, and myself. And by the way, now's the time to sign up for the Access Panthers newsletter. We've got a straight up guide that's coming to your inbox on Thursday morning, so you can be prepared for all conversations with your buddies via text and via DMs about the draft before the first pick is in. And we will have comprehensive coverage of this draft weekend, from features to news nuggets to analysis. We'll do my annual grading of the draft on Sunday that typically is among our most thorough analysis columns of the year. We're excited about this. Come chill along with us on day 3. If you're out and you're hanging out with your family and whatever, we will have a live tracker straight up for you where you can come back and get our thoughts. You can get all the information. Alex and I are going to be just crunching the numbers, analyzing the picks, maybe telling a couple of jokes from mid-90s TV and movies that Alex doesn't understand.
I don't.
It's going to be great. It's going to be great. We are excited to be here for you guys because we are here for you to process blue. Boom.
Dude, Charlotte Observer's new tagline. Charlotte Observer, come chill with us.
Yeah, come chill with us. Come on, man. Just bring the whole gang.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Mike Kaye and myself and our wonderful producer, Emily Broyles. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all of your Panthers needs, including your NFL draft needs. Mike, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
Emily, that's a wrap.